Hi everybody. Today I want to talk about something very personal, and I just want to warn you, it might upset some of you. It's not a very happy story. It is very personal, but the point in making this video now and just coming clean with it is the more that I open up about it, the more I let it out, the easier it is to move past it. And hopefully, if I can tell my story to people and put it out there for all of you, surely there's other people like you, particularly guys out there, who I hope can relate to this story. So about 4 years ago, I was raped while living and working in the state of Arizona, and I want to talk about that. And I know that's kind of hard to explain. I know it's hard to hear that. The few people that I have told about it, I remember as I told them, they kind of, it's not that they didn't believe me, they did, but they couldn't believe it. It was it wasn't the kind of thing that happens every day, especially for a guy. And, I think the worst part about it, before I go into detail about what happened, the worst part about it was how all this time until now, I really felt like it was completely my fault. I felt like I brought up the situation, I made the situation happen to myself. It was my fault, it was my doing, and that's why I didn't tell people about it. That's why I didn't really illustrate the details and go into enough detail about it. It was also extremely confusing. I was a virgin at the time, and, I was kind of under the influence of society's pressure that, to be an adult is to have a relationship. You have to get laid. You have to lose your virginity. It's a curse to be a virgin at age 23 is how I felt about myself at that age. Yes, I was 23, and initially I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and things just weren't working out, career-wise, socially-wise. I didn't really have any friends. I didn't have a good source of income. I was working 2 part-time jobs and barely making ends meet, and one of my coworkers at one of my jobs told me that he just got back from working at the Grand Canyon, and so that got my attention. I decided to do some research about his job, the company that he worked for, and so I went online and I did some research, and I filled out an application, and 2 weeks later I got an email confirmation letter that there was a job available for me, so I decided to take it. I didn't feel like I had anything to lose, and I thought, it was time for a change. I was pretty convinced that there was nothing for me left in Portland, so I went for it. I said yes. And so, in October of 2012, I sold everything. I got rid of all my furniture and minimalized everything. I put everything I had in boxes, gave away as much as I could, and I set out to the Grand Canyon. And the Grand Canyon offers housing they offered housing for employees and their families. So when I arrived there, they gave me a cabin to live in, and I was assigned to a cabin with somebody who was already there, a roommate, and it was a very small cabin, and the roommate situation was very Bert and Ernie, you might say, like 2 single beds across on opposite sides of the room, and kind of a big dresser in the center of the room that kind of divided our space. So he had his dresser right there, and I had my dresser right here, and our beds on each side, and the door was kind of in the very center. And in the corner of where his bed was a closet for our coats and the bathroom. And all there was in the bathroom was a toilet and a shower. No bathtub, though. It was like a shower stool, you might say. And so, when I arrived, I met my roommate, and I'm not going to say his name, but he came from Florida. He was about 60 years old, and I was 23, and he came off very friendly, and he seemed like, because he was older, that he seemed like somebody I could trust, somebody I could look up to, somebody who had been there a little while longer than I had. So I wanted to trust him. I wanted to be his friend. I wanted him to I wanted to believe that he would make me feel welcome, that he would help me adjust, and we just hit it off. We went for a walk together on the first day, and I thought nothing of it. He just showed me the Grand Canyon for the first time. He showed me where the grocery store was, and he showed me different walking paths to get to different places around the park, and everything was going very well. I thought that I was making a good friend in him, and he told me that he was happy that I was his roommate, and it just seemed like a lucky match, you might say. And when we got home from, walking around and him showing me different things around the park, he stayed on his side of the room and he read his book, and I settled in on my side of the room and unpacked, and he just came off as a pretty quiet, introverted kind of fellow, and I admired that in him. I'm always trying to be kind of the quiet, peaceful person too. And I told him I was a Buddhist, and he respected that. He didn't try to argue with me about that. And so that was a good feeling. I don't think he was necessarily a Buddhist himself, but he definitely came off Buddhist appreciating. Like, he appreciated Buddhism. He understood it. He admired it. And I had hoped that, maybe the more I got to know him, the more I would get to know my own faith. And, it was very easy to trust people at that time. It was very easy to want to focus on the good in people. And, it was hard to meet nice people. It was hard to meet good people. I worked in customer service a lot, and I knew how mean people could be to people they don't have to be nice to, people who are paid to be treated badly. And so whenever I met a friendly stranger, I wanted to assume that they were a naturally very good person, and I never would have believed anything bad about them if I could have helped it. But anyway, it was the third or fourth day of living with him when he told me he was gay. And, we had had some conversations. I had told him a little bit about my past. And just to give you a brief description, I grew up in a very gay-friendly family. My mother taught me at a very young age to embrace the LGBT community, and it has always felt like a second home to me. My godfather was gay, so I always called him my fairy godfather, and he and his partner used to take care of me when my mom was on long business trips when I was 6, and I've always loved him. He's the best guy in the world. I miss him very much. I don't see him every day anymore, but anyway. When my roommate told me that he was gay, I didn't really think anything of it. I'm not sure why he told me that, but when he did, it kind of led to me telling him about my own experience in the gay community. I'm not gay, but for a very long time I was very confused about my sexuality, and a lot of that was brought on by loneliness. A lot of that was kind of just the way that I went through puberty, the way that I grew up, kind of my own journey in adolescence, which, I'll talk about maybe in a future video. But the point was, I was still somewhat confused about my sexuality. I was still a virgin. I was still not very sure about anything. My father was never really around much when I was a little kid, so I never really had the squirrels and bees lecture, if that makes any sense. And I'm sorry, I'm not really good at talking about this. So anyway, I guess I was vulnerable. I guess I wasn't really sure what to do. I wasn't sure how it was going to happen or when it was going to happen, who it was going to happen with. I was pretty sure I wanted to do it with a girl, but, I wasn't really good at that. I wasn't really good at talking to girls. I wasn't good at flirting with girls. I didn't even know how to flirt with girls. And, and I'll talk more about that in another video as well, but the point was, when my roommate told me he was gay, I wasn't really sure how to handle that, nor did I know what he was asking me for in telling me that. And so I would have liked to have thought nothing of it and left it at that. And one night, I read something aloud to him that I had written in my journal, just a thought. I wanted to share my thought with my friend. And so I went over to his he was lying on his bed, and so I just walked over and I was like, hey, listen to this, tell me what you think. And so I read something I had written earlier that day, just an idea, and just to see what he had to say about it. And at the end of it, he mushed his lips together and he leaned in forward towards me and he basically wanted me to kiss him. And I went for it. I wasn't really sure what to do. If he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gone along with it. I hadn't really seen that coming. I hadn't really planned what to do if that ever happened. I didn't think when he told me he was gay that he was asking me, that he was saying something else, that he was possibly attracted to me. I didn't think about that, nor did I really want to. And I don't really know why, but I guess, the confusion, the desperation, I just went with it just to see how it felt. So I kissed him back, and then I really wasn't sure what to do, and so I kind of kept going. So by that I mean I lied down next to him for a while just to see, where this was going to go, and and we started to make out for a little while. He took off his clothes, and then without really asking me if it was okay first, he went ahead and pulled off all of mine. And, he started humping me. We didn't... Oh, God, sorry. While it was going on, I did not enjoy it at all. And, I kept waiting for things to calm down. I actually, while it was happening, I tried to imagine I was doing it with somebody else just to try to enjoy it, but I just couldn't. And I don't know, it was very confusing. I didn't know what to do. And, eventually, he stopped humping, we stopped, and I walked away, I put my clothes back on, and then I went into the bathroom and took a shower, and I started crying, because, I really wasn't happy about what had just happened. I didn't really like that, and, I didn't really know what to do about it, so, I kind of just let him, jump on me, and I know he had a good time, and I know that, I know that, out of my own confusion, out of my own desperation, I gave in to it. Afterward, I tried to talk to him about it. I tried to tell him that, look, can we talk about this? I'm not really sure what just happened here, but, I'm not really sure what we just did. I'm not really sure what this means, and I really don't know what happens now. But he didn't want to talk about it. He wanted, he tried to pull me back onto the bed, and, and this time I pulled myself back, and I walked away, but, I really just wanted to have a serious man-to-man talk with him about, what we had done. And, he was in his own world. He was in, he then kicked my ass with, his foot, like, in a very flirtatious way. Like, he snuck his foot, around me, and he kind of just gave me a very soft kick. And I was pretty upset about that, and, I wanted to really talk about what we had done, and his mind was already made up what I was going to say. He was already convinced that, I just wanted to reject him, and he claimed he understood that. He was like, oh, I understand rejection, it's totally cool, whatever, you weren't into it anyway, I'm totally cool, never mind, whatever. He brushed me off like that. And then, the next morning, he, came over to my side of the bed. He came over to my side of the room, and he put his hands on me when I was trying to sleep. He didn't touch my privates or anything, but he did touch my feet, and he touched me without permission, and he was flirting with me. He was calling me baby, and, he kept bugging me, basically. He was making me uncomfortable. And I yelled at him, I barked at him, I told him to go away, and, and he did. He was upset. He went back to his side of the room, and he asked me if there was anything he could do to apologize for all that had happened so far. And he also said that it wasn't his fault what happened, that what happened was what happened, and I wasn't really sure what to believe or how to feel about it. I was still very confused. And so if it wasn't his fault, whose fault was it? And I thought it was mine, because I thought that, if I had said no, at the right time, if I had, known when to back away, if I had known how to read signals, how to read signs, had I don't really know. All I know is that I didn't know anything about having sex. I didn't know anything about... I didn't know what it was like to, have sex. And, but I felt very used. I was really hurt that he didn't want to listen to my feelings. I wanted to tell him something. I just wanted to talk about it. I wanted to understand what had happened, and he didn't want to talk about it. And he kind of just left me feeling very confused about something that I never would have given into if he hadn't set me up for it, and, I would have preferred, that we had talked about doing anything before actually doing anything, and I wasn't really in a comfortable situation. I didn't know how to stand up for myself, and I blamed myself for that. I didn't know how to assert myself as a man, and I blamed myself for that. When I went through puberty, my baby face from my childhood days survived and went on. I was a little alfalfa plush doll as a kid, is how I felt about my childhood looks. And I had hoped to grow up to look like Leonardo or Brad Pitt, and I didn't. And I just looked like my baby self in a much bigger and taller body. And I blamed myself for being cute, And, I felt that, whatever it was that attracted him to me, I blamed myself for whatever it was, even though I didn't know what it was. I just wasn't sure what was going on. It was a very confusing thing. And, you know, I felt really alone. I felt really alone. I didn't know who to talk to. By the time I told Human Resources what was going on between me and him, he had already quit and gone back home, and, there wasn't anything they could do about it, and, it wasn't really the kind of company that really cared for their employees. They were, in the state of Arizona, they didn't even have to give breaks to workers, even though they could schedule them 9-hour days, they didn't have to give them breaks. Like, that's how, it didn't feel like a very safe environment to open up. And, and because of how confusing it was, it took me a long time to really process the memory. It took me a long time. I thought that I must have done something. I must have said something to give him the wrong idea. And, I don't know, man. I really don't. But whatever happened, it just, I thought it was my fault. I felt like what happened was a result of my lack of maturity, my lack of understanding, my lack of experience, and all I know is that I felt very used. And, and when I was crying in the shower right after what happened, I just felt so dirty about myself. And, it was a very unhappy thing, and I just didn't know what to do, and I was really ashamed of how it all played out. And so, after he left, and I eventually came back home to Portland, I just felt really alone about the situation. I felt very embarrassed. I felt very uncomfortable, and I just felt like, it was my fault for letting it happen. It was my fault for not doing anything about it in time. It was my fault for not knowing how to handle the situation. And, I just kept it to myself. And, I had a lot of drama with other roommates, because I was afraid of what might happen. I didn't want to go through that again. And, you know, I didn't even realize how it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't my fault. You know, I kept it to myself because I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, and I just felt really alone. You know, society does not teach guys how to deal with being raped. They teach women how to be careful from guys who are out to rape women. But they don't teach guys how not to get raped by other guys. Or by other women, for that matter. You know, society just has this stereotypical image that all men are like these big bad wolves chasing little lambs, and, you know, men can get hurt too. And I felt really hurt. I just felt really used. If anything, I felt like my feelings were denied and uncared about. I felt manipulated. You know, the reason why I wanted to trust him was because he was acting all friendly. He was being all nice and kind, and he assured me that, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I met you. I'll take care of you. Don't worry. Everything's going to be just fine. Come with me. You know, that's the way he went about it. You know, he seduced me. He manipulated me. And I can say that he manipulated me because when I wanted to talk about how I felt, he didn't want to listen to me because his mind was already made up. And, you know, he got out because he knew that I just might go to HR. He knew that what he did was wrong. But I was raped. You know, I mean, it may not have been in a street alley by some gang member. It was, you know, it was rape. You know, when I got home, I talked to a really close friend about everything, and, you know, he happened to be gay, and he happened to be a lot older than I was, but he was also a lot more sincere. He was also a lot wiser, a lot more genuine, a lot more understanding. And not just and he understood me pretty well. Like, I had told him a lot about my childhood, a lot about my past. He knew about my upbringing. He knew about, you know, a lot of things I had been through leading up to what happened in Arizona. So when I told my friend about this roommate in Arizona and how he got me into what happened, how things led to one thing after another, and the next thing I knew, you know, I mean, he had gotten me naked, and he had, you know, and done all these things, and then he denied my feelings afterward. He wasn't there to, you know, he basically went about it very casually, making me feel used. When I told my friend all of this, he said, "You were raped." That's what he said, and he said it over and over again until I could take it in. He kept saying, "You were raped." And then he told me it wasn't my fault, you know. He told me it wasn't my fault. He told me it wasn't my fault. And there was so much relief in that. Because I thought it was. All that time. I thought it was my own fault. I thought it was my fault. And I blamed myself all that time. Forced myself to keep it to myself. And find a way to deal with it. But that was really comforting when somebody gave me absolution. Because, I really did feel like it was my fault. And no one deserves that. No one should ever have to feel bad about a situation like that, I'm sorry. Anyway. I didn't really know what to do back then. And even now, 4 years later, I'm still single. I'm still without a relationship. And I've learned to appreciate that. I've learned to find gratitude in being independent. I eventually kind of discovered that it really wasn't a big deal to me to have sex with somebody. All this time I thought getting laid was what I thought I wanted to do because that's what society makes us feel. And once I realized all I really wanted in a relationship and how platonic those desires are, I really just want to spend time with people. That's kind of when I realized, I started taking some tests, and, I realized that I'm actually, not sexually driven and that was really the problem. I didn't enjoy what I was doing, and that's not really what I wanted in a relationship. And so I don't know why I'm talking about this now. I'll talk more about my sexuality in another video. I am asexual, and I'm pretty confident about that. And I know there's people who don't understand asexuality, and quite honestly, I don't give a shit what you people think about that. I mean, you either get it or you don't. It's how I feel. What really matters is how I feel about myself. And those feelings are based on my experiences. They're based on my reality. They're based on what I've seen, what I've been through. And I wouldn't say that my sexuality is a choice. And I'll talk more about that in another video. But it's easy to sometimes think it might be a choice because because, you know, what happened was pretty upsetting for me. I didn't know. Nothing could have prepared me for that. And there really wasn't a whole lot afterward to help me understand it. The more I talk about it with the right people, you know, the more it makes sense. The easier it is to talk about, the easier it is to recover. And that's what I'm trying to do. You know, I just really just want to be happier. And, you know, every day I have a good day or I have a learning day. And, you know, these experiences, especially these bad ones, you know, they do make you stronger in a lot of ways. They've made me stronger. You know, having experienced being flirted with in a confusing way, having experienced being touched without permission, kind of defines, you know, how I treat people today. That defines why I don't do that with ladies, you know, especially girls I don't know. Like, I don't like to flirt with the bartender who's serving me. I don't like to flirt with the barista at Starbucks. I mean, when I meet a girl who I find attractive, I just want to get to know her. I just want to ask her, I just want to be as nice as I can and hopefully be her friend, and see what happens. I don't think about having sex with them. I just think about how nice it would be to spend time with them. And, you know, but I don't like to go about it as though all I care about is getting laid. And a lot of my behavior, a lot of how I don't treat people is a result of the way that I've been treated in ways that makes me uncomfortable. So I'm gonna kind of wrap it up at that. Every day is an experience. Every day is, you know, I learn. Every day I learn to be a little happier. Meditation helps a lot for me, and I'll talk more about that in another video. Thank you for listening.